I sometimes wonder if broken families run in our blood. Mom used to say I was just like Dad, and not in a good way. She'd stare at me across the dinner table, her lips pressed into a thin line, as if seeing him in my face brought back all the pain he'd caused her. I was 5 when Dad left. The memory is fuzzy around the edges, but I remember the shouting, the doors slamming, and Mom crying in the kitchen when she thought I was asleep. He moved in with some woman from his office, classic story, right? Emma, go to your room, Mom would snap whenever I asked about him. I don't want to talk about your father. But I couldn't help it. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw pieces of him, the same dark hair, the same dimpled smile, the same way of cocking my head to the side when I was thinking. As I grew older, the resemblance only got stronger, and so did Mom's resentment. Sure, Dad paid alimony, good money, too. But he never checked how it was spent, and Mom, well, she had her priorities. New clothes, fancy haircuts, weekend trips with her friends. Meanwhile, I wore hand-me-downs and learned to cook my own meals by age 10 because she was too tired to make dinner. I saw Dad maybe twice a year, awkward dinner meetings where he'd ask about school and sports like he was interviewing a stranger. He never came to my school plays or soccer games. Never checked my report cards or asked about my friends. It was like he'd checked out completely, content to just send money and pretend that made him a father. How's your mother? He'd ask during those dinners, stirring his coffee without looking at me. Fine, I'd always say, because what else could I tell him? That she barely spoke to me except to criticize? That she spent his money on herself while I wore shoes with holes in them? That sometimes, late at night, I could hear her crying and cursing his name? Things got even more complicated when Mom met Steve. I was 15, and suddenly she was transformed, giggling like a teenager, spending hours on the phone, coming home late with a dreamy look in her eyes. Within a year, they were married, and I had a stepfather who looked at me like I was an inconvenient piece of furniture that came with the house. Your mother deserves to be happy, Steve would say whenever I dared to complain about anything. You should be grateful she's found someone who appreciates her. But I could see the way he looked at me when Mom wasn't around, like I was a reminder of her past, a living, breathing symbol of her failed first marriage. And Mom? She was too caught up in her new romance to notice how lonely I'd become. After Steve moved in, the house felt smaller somehow. Every room seemed to hold their shared jokes, their loving glances, their whispered conversations that stopped when I walked in. One spring evening, Mom called me into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, her reading glasses perched on her nose, surrounded by papers and bills. Emma, we need to talk about college. My heart lifted for a moment. Finally, I thought, we're going to discuss the plans, the savings, everything I'd been waiting to hear about. I sat down across from her, trying to contain my excitement. You'll be graduating next year, she said, shuffling the papers. And college is expensive. I nodded, waiting for her to mention the savings account I was sure she'd been filling with Dad's alimony all these years. The thing is, she continued, not quite meeting my eyes, we don't have money for your college. You'll need to figure out how to pay for it yourself. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. What? But what about Dad's alimony? You've been saving it, right? Mom's face turned red. How dare you, she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to raise a child? Your father's money barely covered our basic needs. But he's been paying for years, I pressed, my voice shaking. Where did it all go? You ungrateful little. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I fed you. I clothed you. I put a roof over your head. And you have the nerve to question me about money? You should be ashamed of yourself. I started working at Jerry's cafe the next week. Every day after school, I'd pull on the scratchy polyester uniform and spend hours taking orders, carrying plates, and forcing smiles for tips. My feet ached, my back hurt, and my homework suffered, but I stayed late whenever I could, picking up extra shifts and covering for other waitresses. Meanwhile, Mom and Steve were wrapped up in their own world, heads bent together over business plans and spreadsheets. Steve loved to hold court at dinner, bragging about all his past business ventures. "I had this amazing import-export thing going in Phoenix," he'd say, gesturing with his fork. "And before that, a chain of fitness centers in San Diego. But this new idea..." He'd lean in like he was sharing state secrets. "This one's going to be different. We're talking serious money here. All we need is some startup capital." I didn't pay much attention to their plans until I overheard Mom one night talking about using Emma's college fund for their new business venture. That's when it hit me, she had been saving the alimony money after all. She just wasn't saving it for me. A week later, they signed the lease on a small storefront downtown. Mom was beaming as she handed over the check, all those years of Dad's alimony, transformed into Steve's latest business scheme. All my hopes for college turned into someone else's dream. Mom's pregnancy announcement came right after their business opened. She was practically glowing, touching her stomach and making plans for the nursery before she was even showing. Finally, she'd say, her eyes sparkling, "I'm having a baby with the man I truly love." The words stung every time, but I tried to focus on my work at the cafe and saving for college. The night of my high school graduation, I was celebrating with my best friend Sarah. We were at her house, still in our caps and gowns, taking photos and dreaming about the future. I got home late, tired but happy, only to find Mom waiting for me at the kitchen table. "Emma, sit down," she said, her hand resting on her now visible baby bump. "We need to talk about something important." I sat, still riding the high of graduation, but her expression made my stomach knot. "You're 18 now," she began, her voice oddly formal. "You're an adult, and it's time for you to start taking care of yourself." I stared at her, not comprehending. "What do you mean?" "You need to move out," she said flatly. "The house is too small, and when the baby comes, we'll need the space. Steve and I have decided to turn your room into the nursery." The graduation cap I was holding slipped from my fingers. "Move out? But, where am I supposed to go? I don't have anywhere else." She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "You can ask your father for help. He's still your father, after all." My hands shaking, I called Dad that evening. His hello was hesitant, like he wasn't sure why I'd be calling. "Dad, I tried to keep my voice steady, I need help. Mom's kicking me out. She says I need to leave because of the baby. Can I stay with you for a while?" There was a long pause. When I arrived at his house an hour later, his wife Janet's scowl said everything before she even opened her mouth. I told them everything, about being kicked out, about the college money, about Mom using the alimony for her new husband's business. Dad ran his hands through his hair, looking older than I remembered. "Emma, I paid your mother enough alimony over the years to send you to several colleges. If she wasted it, that's on her. But he glanced at Janet, then back at me, "I can't help you now. The truth is, most of that alimony came from my parents. I'm not as well off as your mother thinks." "Just for a little while," I pleaded. "Just until I can find somewhere else." He nodded reluctantly. "You can stay here temporarily. Just until you figure something out." That first night at Dad's house, I couldn't sleep. My temporary bed in their guest room felt like exactly what it was, temporary. The sheets were stiff and unfamiliar, and every creak of the house made me more aware that I didn't belong here. Around midnight, voices from downstairs drifted up through the heating vent. "I want her out of this house." Janet's voice was sharp and clear. "I'm not having some stranger living here. This is my home, and I didn't sign up for this." "She's not a stranger, she's my daughter." Dad's voice was weaker, uncertain, almost pleading. "Your daughter? The one you barely know? The one you see twice a year? She's practically a stranger, and I won't have her here. Do you even know her favorite color? Her best friend's name? What classes she took in school?" Dad's silence spoke volumes. "That's what I thought," Janet continued. "She's just going to disrupt our whole life. Where will we entertain? What will people think? There was a long pause before Dad spoke again. Okay, I'll tell her tomorrow morning. I just need until then. Let me handle it my way. I lay there in the dark, tears sliding silently down my face, my whole body rigid with tension. So this was it, nowhere left to go. Then I remembered seeing Dad's address book in the kitchen when I'd gotten a glass of water earlier. Maybe there was one last option, even if it felt like grasping at straws. I crept downstairs, my sock feet silent on the carpet, holding my breath every time a floorboard threatened to creak. The address book was still there, and by the light of my phone, I found what I was looking for, my grandparents' address. I'd never met them, never even seen a picture, but right now they were my only hope. My hand shook as I copied down their information. At dawn, before anyone else was awake, I grabbed my bags, I hadn't even unpacked them, and left a note, "Don't worry, I found somewhere else to go." My throat tight with unshed tears, I took one last look at my father's house, before walking away. 2 hours and 3 bus rides later, I was standing on a porch in a quiet neighborhood, my heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. An elderly couple opened the door, my grandparents, but they felt like strangers. The woman had kind eyes and silver hair, while the man stood tall and dignified, his face weathered but gentle. "I'm Emma," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm John's daughter, your granddaughter." I know this is completely out of the blue, but I didn't know where else to go. The change in their faces was immediate. My grandmother's eyes filled with tears as she pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Emma, finally. We've waited so long to meet you." Over coffee and homemade muffins, which my grandmother insisted on making despite my protests, I told them everything, Mom kicking me out, Dad's situation, the college money, all of it. They exchanged looks I couldn't quite read, a whole conversation passing between them silently. "Your mother wouldn't let us see you," my grandfather said finally, his voice heavy with old pain. "We tried for years. Every birthday, every Christmas, we sent cards and gifts. They always came back unopened. We've been helping your father with the alimony payments all this time, hoping some of it would help you." "We had no idea she was spending it all," my grandmother added, reaching for my hand across the table. Her touch was warm and comforting, everything a grandmother's should be. Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes kind but shrewd. "Emma, here's what we're going to do. You'll live with us, and we'll help you with college. But I believe in earning your way." He smiled. "I own a chain of grocery stores across several states. How would you like to work in one of them? Learn the business from the ground up? It won't be easy, but you'll learn everything, from stocking shelves, to managing inventory, to running the books." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not just a home, but a future? A chance to learn and earn? After feeling unwanted for so long, here were people offering me not just shelter, but opportunity. "Yes," I said immediately, sitting up straighter. "Yes, please. That would be amazing. I'm not afraid of hard work. I've been working at the cafe for months. I'll learn everything you can teach me." Life settled into a rhythm I'd never known before. My days were split between college classes and working at my grandparents' stores. Unlike my previous waitressing job, this felt different, like I was building something, learning something new every day. I started at the cash register, learning how to handle money and deal with customers. Then came warehouse work, where I learned about inventory management and supply chains. The accounting department taught me about margins, overhead costs, and the complex financial dance that kept the business running. My grandfather made sure I experienced every aspect of the operation, from the ground up. Sometimes Dad and Janet would visit my grandparents. I'd hear their car pull up and quietly slip into the back office, or make myself scarce in the warehouse. Janet would pretend not to see me if our paths crossed, and Dad would give awkward nods in my direction. It was strange, watching him play the dutiful son while barely acknowledging his daughter's existence. Mom never called, never visited. Sometimes I'd hear bits of news through mutual acquaintances. Their business was struggling, the baby was growing, but I pushed it all away. I had my own life to focus on now. For years passed like this, and suddenly I was graduating college. The morning after the ceremony, Grandpa called me into his office. He sat behind his big oak desk, looking more serious than usual. "Emma," he began, folding his hands on the desk, "your grandmother and I have been talking. You've done exceptionally well here, both in your studies and in the business." I nodded, wondering where this was going. "I'm not getting any younger," he continued, "and I've been thinking about the future of the company. I'd like to offer you the position of deputy director." My mouth fell open. Deputy director? But I just graduated yesterday. He held up a hand. "You've been working in this business for 4 years now. You understand our operations better than managers who've been here twice as long. You've proven yourself in every position we've put you in. But," I stammered, "isn't it too soon?" "For director? Yes, that will come later. You still need to learn the finer points of running the entire operation. But deputy director?" He smiled. "You're ready. The salary is substantial, of course. You'll be comfortable." I couldn't contain my excitement about the promotion. That weekend, I met up with my college friends at our favorite coffee shop, telling them about my new position and the incredible opportunity my grandfather had given me. "Deputy director? Right out of college?" Sarah squealed, hugging me. "Emma, that's amazing." We spent hours celebrating, planning a proper night out for the following weekend. It felt good to share my success with people who'd seen me struggle through college, working long hours while maintaining my grades. A few days later, I was reviewing inventory reports in my new office when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Emma?" The voice I hadn't heard in 4 years. "Mom." "Emma, please don't hang up." I gripped my pen so hard it nearly snapped. "What do you want?" "I heard about your new job," she said, her voice trembling. "Emma, we need help. We're in serious trouble." "We?" I asked coldly. "Your sister too," she said quickly. "She's innocent in all this. Please, Emma, we need to put the past behind us. Family should help family." I sat back in my chair, listening as she spilled out their troubles. Steve's business had failed spectacularly. They'd mortgaged the house to keep it afloat, borrowed money from relatives and friends. Now the bank was threatening foreclosure. "We'll be homeless," she choked out. "Your little sister, she's only 4, Emma. She doesn't deserve this." I felt something shift inside me. Years of hurt crystallized into a single, sharp idea. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. "I might be willing to help," I said carefully. "If you apologize for everything. Tell me exactly what you're sorry for. List it all, every bit of it. Then maybe I'll help." There was a pause, then the words started tumbling out. "I'm sorry," she began. "I'm sorry I spent your college money on Steve's business. I'm sorry I kicked you out when you needed me most. I'm sorry I kept you from your grandparents. I'm sorry I chose Steve over you. I'm sorry I was a terrible mother. I'm sorry I resented you for looking like your father. I'm sorry I made you feel unwanted in your own home. I'm sorry I never came to your school events. I'm sorry I made you feel less important than Steve. I'm sorry I didn't save any money for your future. I'm sorry I blamed you for your father leaving." The list went on and on. 4 years of guilt, spilling out in desperate words. All captured on my phone's recorder. "Okay," I said when she finally finished. "I'll help. Give me a few days to arrange the money." "Thank you, Emma," she breathed. "Thank you so much. You don't know what this means to us." I ended the call and stared at the recording on my phone. Of course I wasn't going to send her any money. But her confession? That was worth more than any amount she'd asked for. A week dragged by. I wasn't surprised when my phone lit up with my mother's number again. "When are you sending the money? We need it urgently." Her voice was tense, impatient. I leaned back in my office chair, hitting the record button on my phone. I'm not sending any money. What? The word came out as a hiss. I just wanted to hear you apologize. To hear you admit everything you did to me. I kept my voice steady, professional. That's all I wanted. There was a moment of stunned silence, then the explosion began. You manipulative little bitch, she screamed. You're just like your father, a lying, scheming piece of shit. Is this funny to you? Playing with people's lives? No, Mother, it's not funny. It's justice. Justice? You want to talk about justice? Do you know what you did to my life? You ruined everything. Your father would never have left if it wasn't for you. Every time he looked at you, he saw his chance to escape. I let her rant, the recorder catching every word. You want to know the truth? Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. I've regretted not getting an abortion every single day of your life. I never wanted you. You were my biggest mistake, and I wish you'd never been born. My hand was shaking, but I managed to keep my voice level. Goodbye, Mother. I hung up and sat there for a long moment, staring at the 2 recordings on my phone. Then I opened Facebook and started typing. Want to know the whole truth about my mother? Listen to these recordings to the end. I uploaded both files, the desperate apologies and the vitriolic truth that followed. Then I hit post. The reactions started pouring in almost immediately. Sarah Thompson, Mom's best friend from church, I'm in shock. All these years you told us Emma abandoned you. How could you lie like this? Linda Martinez, Mom's cousin, using your daughter's college money for your new husband's business? Then kicking her out? And now saying you wish she was never born? I'm ashamed to call you family. Karen Williams, Mom's sister, I just listened to both recordings. I can't believe you kept her from her grandparents all these years. And now you have the nerve to ask her for money? You make me sick, sis. Robert Johnson, Steve's business partner, this explains a lot about where the startup money really came from. Stealing your daughter's future to fund that doomed business, shameful. Within hours, it spread through our old social circle like wildfire. More comments kept coming. I'm unfriending you right now. No mother should ever say such things to their child. All those Facebook posts about being a devoted mother, what a fraud. Emma, honey, I'm so sorry. We had no idea what was really going on. Now we know why you always changed the subject when people asked about Emma. The truth finally comes out. Her carefully maintained image of the devoted mother, wronged wife, and successful businesswoman crumbled with each new comment and share. Church friends, business associates, extended family, everyone was hearing both recordings, her fake apology followed by the raw, ugly truth of her real feelings. The aftermath of the recordings hit like a tsunami. A few days after my post went viral, my phone rang again. Mother. You've destroyed me, she said, her voice raw. Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation? My friends won't even look at me anymore. The church group has asked me to step down from the committee. Are you happy now? I didn't bother responding. Instead, I simply blocked her number, then systematically went through every social media platform and messaging app, blocking her there too. It was surprisingly easy, like finally cutting away a diseased limb that had been hurting me for years. Through the grapevine, mainly Sarah, who still lived in our old neighborhood, I heard the rest of their story. The bank foreclosed on their house. Steve's business debts had piled up too high, and there was no way out. They ended up moving to a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the edge of town. My little sister, the wanted child, now shares a room with their exercise equipment and storage boxes. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty about their situation. But then I remember all those years of rejection, of being treated like an unwanted houseguest in my own home, and I realize they built this house of cards themselves. I just happened to be the wind that finally blew it down. Dad still comes around to visit his parents, usually with Janet in tow. I see the way he looks at me now, a mixture of regret and something else. Jealousy, maybe. The daughter he abandoned now sits in an office bigger than his, making executive decisions about a business empire he probably thought would go to him someday. But the truth is, I don't know if I'll inherit any of this. Grandpa never talks about succession plans, and I never ask. It doesn't matter, really. What they've given me is worth more than any inheritance. They gave me a chance when everyone else had thrown me away. They taught me about business, yes, but more importantly, they taught me about family. Real family. Every morning, I still have coffee with Grandma before work. She makes those same muffins she made the first day I showed up on their doorstep. Grandpa still reviews reports with me, teaching me something new every day about the business he built from nothing. You know, Emma, he said to me just yesterday, sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us exactly where we need to be. Looking back at the scared, homeless teenager I was 4 years ago, I couldn't agree more. I lost a mother and father, but I gained something far more valuable, a future, a purpose, and people who believe in me not because they have to, but because they choose to.